talked about this a little bit, obviously, on the way over here. And I think for both of us, we don't really have like and I think this is our privilege, neither one of us really has a date, like when we were children, where we remember it. But it's kind of something we just always were aware of. And of course, we both had parents who, told us, everybody's created equal, and, there are certain words we don't say, and all this sort of thing. But I don't have like a date as a child where I really, really was aware of racism. I don't know if you have one.
So growing up in a Christian home, the message was every life has value. And we are to love everyone, we are to treat everyone the same. And I mean, when you're young and you have friends who are persons of color, you don't see what's really happening. It doesn't make sense as a kid. You don't see it. I mean, our kids are kind of different in that now. But I think as we grew up, we were aware that there were people who were racist. We were aware that they were the bad guys out there and that we don't treat people in this way. But for us, it was like, that's not something that we lived with every day. So I think you fast forward to last 10 plus years and kind of coming into an awareness of what that looks like.
So when I was doing my bachelor's, it's in English literature, and so I had to take several classes in African American literature, and that kind of turned me on to the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln, which of course, race, you can't avoid it. And so just that's when I really became aware, wow, this really happened. And then, and the system was built on this, and so this is still happening. And so I would share stuff with Jeff. Of course, I come at it always from a mother's perspective of, and that's today really hits home, just my son is white, so I don't have to, of course I tell him respect the police and all that good stuff, but I've never had to worry. I've never had to tell him don't wear a hoodie, and stuff like that. And so that's where it really hits me as a mom. But I would share stuff with you just about, especially how moms are treated and families separated and that sort of thing. And so I think as we were talking, he told me that's really when you became aware too, right?
Right. Yeah, I mean, basically she would come and share these things about history, about here's how black people had been treated years ago. And these are stories about it and just kind of having an awareness there. And then for me, and I think for us as a couple, one of the kind of moments that was pivotal was my brother-in-law. He's got a doctorate, and he's studied in an education, particularly urban education context, dealing with issues of class, race, diversity, poverty, and trauma. And he's also he's Latino, and so he came to us one day, and we were just kind of talking about these things. It's not talking about his work, understanding what are you doing and what are you finding, because he's doing a lot of research, a lot of studies. And he came out and just started telling us what education was like in urban context, that for us who we went to school and we had a desk and he was saying, look, that's great, congratulations, but in urban context, you will have kids who are getting on the buses hours early for school just to get on public transportation, because school will be the only place that they get a meal that day. And that they've got 50 kids in a classroom, 3 to a chair, not enough books, not enough supplies. And I think for me, for us, we were like, that's never been something that we've been aware of. That's never been something that has kind of been a reality for us. And so that was kind of the starting point of going, and this sounds really terrible to say that we discovered that in our late 20s, early 30s, but man, there's a world bigger than ours. I think we hit on it and already in terms of her experience kind of going through some of the books that she was reading. I mean, honestly, prior to that, we hadn't really had lots of conversations about racial discrimination, because it wasn't something that we had a huge awareness of. I think a conversation that we can both go back to is back in 2013, 2014, when the Trayvon Martin things were happening. and Black Lives Matter really stepped up, and that was kind of the birth of that. And we talked about what Black Lives Matter means and what it means to say that, and how some people can, that's where the Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, really war started. And for us, it really was a conversation about what does it mean to say Black Lives Matter, and why is that not a difficult thing to say,
Yeah. I know for me, having a military background, I really at first struggled, not that I ever believed Black Lives don't matter, but the Blue Lives Matter thing, that at first that really resonated with me, and I just think being military, that it meant something to me. So at first I was like, Blue Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, every life matters. And it was actually Jeff who gave me an analogy that I shared on Facebook, because it changed my whole thinking, where he just said, if one of our children came to you and said, "Mom, do you love me?" would you say, "I love all my kids," or "I love everybody"? When someone feels like they're less important or they've been treated badly, it's really cold to say, "All lives matter, Blue Lives Matter." And so that it was actually his wisdom that made me go, and now it's evolved to the point where I'm really offended when I see All Lives Matter. You might have seen it on Facebook. It really bugs me, because there's so much out there. There's so much out there where we can educate ourselves now. I feel like there's no excuse for saying that. It really does bother me. But I mean, I guess I should be more patient with other people, because I didn't get it at first either.
I think for me, it was birthed out of kind of my adolescence, and not have anything to do with racial discrimination. But I experienced some trauma when I was a teenager, and did a really good job of kind of bottling that up and not expressing it. And it came out 20 years later in counseling, and I had to have a difficult conversation with my father to basically say, during this time where I was experiencing some trauma, where our whole family was experiencing trauma, I felt like I wasn't getting attention paid to me. I had felt like I had been ignored in the midst of pain. And he said something super wise, in which he said, "You go to the kid who's crying." I had two kids, one of them was acting out, one kept it bottled up. And so he was like, "I wasn't aware that you were going through this. How can I help you if you're not the one who's crying? That if you seem like you're fine, this one over here is hurting and saying, I'm going through something, that I have to give my attention to the one that's hurting." And so in my understanding of it, I kind of adapted that, and it kind of became my understanding in terms of just parenting and just a whole lot of other things. But that ultimately, when it comes to the idea of Black Lives Matter, there are people who are raising their hands saying, "I feel marginalized, I feel like I have been ignored, and that my life doesn't matter." And there's nothing wrong with going and saying, "Your life matters." I don't have to qualify that. I don't have to apologize for that. I don't have to sit there and also affirm my value by saying, "Well, we both matter," right? Like I can't let go of that. Like, I will acknowledge you matter so long as you in turn acknowledge that I matter. And I guess I understood that to mean, if someone is coming and saying, "I don't feel like I matter," the most callous thing you can do is sit there and continue to ignore that and say everybody matters. A lot.
So when our kids were little, like preschool, first grade, I noticed that they would, if they had a friend at school, and I would be like, "Which one is that? Which kid are you talking about? You all, you're all little people. I don't know which one you're talking about." They would be, they would say, "Oh, she has brown hair, she has brown eyes." And I finally be like, "Is she white or is she black? Just tell me." And they'd be like, "Mommy, no." And at first I thought, well, this is awesome, and now I'm embarrassed to say this, but I was like, kids today are colorblind. It's so cool, and I don't know where they picked that up, that they shouldn't say white or black or brown, but wherever they did, that's how they were at first. But of course now that's evolved, and a lot of it is because of my son. He's 13, he's on social media, he has, a lot of his friends are not white, and he's very big into, just justice and fairness. And so he gets really enraged about this stuff, and it's great, but conversations with him have been amazing.
I mean, even from a young age, we tried to at least introduce the idea of understanding racial discrimination, and it's sort of embarrassing how we would handle those topics, because we would a lot of times do it through movies and through art where they could see some of these things played out. We were like, hey, let's watch this musical Hairspray. It's got great music and dancing. You're going to love it. And in the context of all of that, then they were really introduced to the idea of racial discrimination and what that looked like. And that was really like when the start of things happened. We're like, guys, things are different for different races and different people. And yeah, this is not Hairspray is not a documentary, but I mean, certainly I think it is indicative of what was happening not too long ago, not too far away, and so for us, it's like, this is something that people did have to endure. This is what life was like, and it wasn't that long ago. And you see the attitudes of people who really were just evil towards them. And so at a young age, I mean, we had that conversation with them, and then just still a lot of times through books, through movies, trying to introduce these concepts.
Our son is he's on the internet, so he knows everything that's happening, and to him it's interesting because it's all new. He'll come and be like, did you hear what happened to this person? And the police, how could they do that? And I'm going, buddy, this has been happening for years. But he really thinks that he's got like a big scoop. But it's neat to see how passionate he is about it. And he had a group conversation with his friends recently, on his phone, and he had some white friends who, even though one of his black friends expressed, this is really offensive to me, guys, they kept going, all lives matter, the police don't mess with you if you're not doing something wrong. Yeah. And it was really upsetting Jack's friend, and Jack finally was just like, look, I don't want to be y'all's friend anymore, and normally I think we would have been like, buddy, keep the peace, make up. But I was like, you know what? No, I think you did the right thing. If people are going to say stuff like that, and I know they're getting it from their parents, but you've got to feel the consequences then.
We really want to impact the culture. We're not sure how to do that, but we're trying, at least with our kids, to go, here's how we can kind of help change attitudes and minds, on your level, and as a family, we'll kind of walk through that together and not act like this is not happening.
Yeah.
It has been refreshing because our pastor, a white guy, has had no issue standing up in the pulpit, looking down the barrel of the camera and saying Black Lives Matter. And what's been interesting is there have been a number of people, young and old, in our church who have high-fived that, liked it on Facebook, shared it. I mean, it really does seem to be a significant moment in our church of recognizing racial discrimination, and that we have a call as Christians to respond to it in ways that honor God and reflect our commitment to God and His justice. At the same time, there have been people who, in all of the series that we go through, how do I say it? Now toes are being stepped on a little bit, and the reactions that we're getting from people, it's like when something hurts, we want it to stop. And so if someone's stepping on our toes, we want to say, okay, please stop stepping on our toes. And so we've had different reactions to that by either people just saying very quickly, okay, we acknowledge racial discrimination is bad. All right, so what's the solution? Tell us the solution right now and let's fix it. And that's not from a standpoint of, I really feel gutted and broken over what has happened to people of color throughout the history of our country, but just to say, this makes me feel uncomfortable because you're basically saying I had something to do with it somehow. And I don't like feeling this way, so I want it to stop now. And that's an extraordinary, and he hasn't said this from the pulpit. I don't know that I would either, but certainly going to say it for your thousands of subscribers. That to me feels an incredibly selfish motivation to say, I'm willing to be a part of helping end racial discrimination because I don't want to feel bad about it anymore. And that has been very surprising to see from Christians.
And also just a straight denial
Sure.
that it's even happening.
There's been a lot of mental and emotional hoops that people are trying to jump through in order to justify not saying Black Lives Matter. And I've had conversations with church members over and over again about the significance and importance of saying Black Lives Matter, of saying we need to go ahead and acknowledge their value because they feel unvalued. In no other area that I can think of in our culture, if someone says, when we celebrate birthdays, we sing happy birthday and we give gifts to one person, but we don't give gifts to everybody else so that they don't feel unspecial on this other person's day. Like we don't qualify it in any other area, but as soon as you say Black Lives Matter, people are very quick to say, well, no, all lives matter, and justify saying that by singling out a specific race to say they matter, you're actually increasing racial tension and racism because you're acknowledging different races and giving one more value than the other. It's like, no, we're not giving that one more. And the statement I've been saying to a lot of my white friends is just to reassure them, going, you're going to be fine. Like, white person, you're going to be fine. You don't have to worry about allowing someone else to feel like their life has value. As Christians, we're called to do that even if that person doesn't reciprocate. I mean, that didn't happen with Jesus, right? I mean, and so Jesus gave value to someone, and very often that wasn't reciprocated. And he still did it anyway. And that's our call, is to say, we have to go make sure that every person understands their value, that they've been created by God in his image, and we love them, he loves them, full stop. And if a race, if an individual, if a group comes and says, we feel like we have been overlooked and we have been ignored, we have been mistreated, the appropriate response to that is to say, we affirm that, we acknowledge it, and your life matters.
I think so much of it does, and I think that's, to me, I think the stumbling block is people don't like being told they have privilege, and it's their privilege that allows them to do that. I think for so many white people of a certain generation, they really are used to being the center of the universe, and they really don't like being told. I think they really balk at the word privilege. And like, I keep trying to explain, like when I post stuff on Facebook, it's aimed at white people. Clearly I'm not educating any Black people on their experience, but I do think it's the privilege thing where they're like, well, I had a hard life, or, I lived through this. I just don't think they get it, that no one's saying that you didn't, it's not taking anything away from you. I think that's the issue, is I don't know quite what the mindset is, but I think it's somehow, I think some people feel like it's taking something away from them, or they're somehow losing something if you let everyone be treated fairly. I don't know what that is.
There are icons, there are things in our culture that I think some people see as racist. And to me, I don't want to allow white people to be the ones who determine what is and isn't racist.
Yes.
And so when all of a sudden you have icons like Uncle Ben's rice, Aunt Jemima, the Land O'Lakes Native American, where things start to change in the culture, you have white people look around and go, well, wait a second, I don't see that as racist. Now you're just tearing down everything. You're tearing down these statues, and now you're tearing down the wrong statue, because you're actually tearing down statues of people who fought in the Civil War to end slavery. And
they don't really care about the statues.
They don't care about statues at all. They don't even eat the syrup. But it's just a matter of I don't want to feel like there are images and things out in the world that are implicitly racist and that I'm not aware of it. Because if all of a sudden you start coming for the lady on the syrup bottle, or the guy with the rice, or this, then there might be other things that are just making people feel, and I hate to use the word microaggressions, but the idea that, hey, we're going to use this imagery and it's safe and okay, And some of my white friends are like, well, wait a second, that makes me feel uncomfortable because what else is out there that I don't realize is viewed as a racist thing by other people? I don't even think those statues should be up.
I don't either.
I don't feel like Confederate flags should be flown. I feel like losers don't get to set up statues.
That's what I never...
Like, losers, you lost the war. So
I
you
don't ever
get
get
fly
the
that
attachment
flag.
to the Confederate. You were on the wrong side of history. It's
Yeah.
a loser's flag. Get rid of it. Like, I don't get it. We've had some really deep conversations, you know, like we've had some conversations sitting in front of the house in the car, you know, because we ran an errand and then we just got into it, and where I'm like crying and cussing and he's just listening to me, because I get really, you know, I'm a passionate person. I get really frustrated and angry at some of my friends and family. The surrounding conversation, they've been really good because thank God we have the same values and we're on the same wavelength. And like I said, there's some things that he's taught me. I guess we've been good for each other.
Sure. We don't know the right answers for this.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in our community, none of them are going to have the right answers. But not only that, but we can't even agree in the white community that it's a problem first. And so like we're having to, and for us go, okay, what do we understand? And how is the best way that we can, you know, navigate it together? How are we going to teach our kids, you know, what is right, what is wrong? And so we've had a lot of conversations about that. And it has been really nice having a partner who feels just as strongly and is willing to kind of tackle the hard issues, not just together, but with the kids. There have been times where you know, as a pastor, I have to be careful about what I put on Facebook, but I'm also not putting up with a lot of stupidity. And particularly when I see racial things coming up, and she has been very helpful. And as I'll sit in bed and start crafting a Facebook post and say, how does this sound? Because what I don't want to do is turn all the white people who might listen to me off by just being offensive, to go, if I can impact you and affect you in a way that is still kind of loving, but also says, let's call out what's happening. You don't lose the audience, but that you also can have people understand what's going on and come along with you. I feel so angry over where our country is and how long it has been this way. And that there are people who seem so invested in making sure that it stays this way, and that well-meaning people, and this is just from my experience, well-meaning people who love Jesus and who can affirm the value of all people. I understand what they think they're saying when they say all lives matter. To me, it is very difficult to see people in the church who struggle with affirming that, or struggle with affirming that all lives matter. And it makes me want to slap them in the head and say, seriously, it's like, why you say these things, but you have such a block, and you have such a block, you have such a wall, a hurdle that comes up when it comes to talking about the Black Lives Matter. And I don't think it's because they're afraid of justifying rioting. I don't think it has anything to do with pancake syrup. I think it has to do with the fact that it makes them very uncomfortable the idea of another race having the same power that they do. Because of the way the whole system is set up, white people have a voice to help do something. And we don't know what that is. And we really want to affect change as best as we can, understanding that it's not our experience. We feel very small when we try to talk about it. I mean, because we don't understand it, because we don't.
So I feel like our responsibility is to talk to other white people, you know,
Yeah.
who, and because there are certain things that got through to me and made me go, wow, like, because I know things that I've seen on Facebook have changed me and educated me, and so it's not like, I mean, I definitely don't think we're making huge strides, but if we can get at least, some white people to see things and be like, man, I am seeing things and I'm not saying anything, or, wow, that is racist.
And that's difficult, I think, as we're trying to navigate this, to understand. We also are trying to be sensitive to this whole idea of a white savior complex. Of, you guys have had to deal with racism for hundreds of years. Totally good. The woke white people are here. We're gonna fix everything.
We'll save the day.
Like,
yeah, you don't want to be like that.
Yeah, and to go, I can't, like, I have no authority here in terms of to black people to say, I understand what you're going through, because I don't. And but I want to do whatever I can do to impact change, and to say that I really wish this was not your experience. And I don't. One of the things that I think has been a bright light in the midst of all of this is, individually, we've got an app. Our kids, we have put them on these little, like, reloadable debit cards, like, with an app that we can give some, and the kids can spend their money. Every time they spend money or they move money around, I get a notification about it to say, oh, he spent $5 here, she spent $5 here. And multiple times in the last few weeks, they have taken some of their money and they've donated it to different organizations and causes without ever talking to us about it. That I just get an update that says they made a donation to change.org, and we go, what was that about? And they go, oh, well, I was giving, to this organization that's fighting for Black Lives Matter. And to me, to go, we haven't been able to affect the outside world a whole lot yet, but our kids are not going to grow up thinking that this is okay. And that's, we try to let them be independent and make decisions with their resources, and that's what they independently feel like they want to support. And that feels like, to me, we're putting people out in the world who are not okay with what's happening, and that they're going to be an advocate for it. And so that
an ally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is our hope.
Yeah.